My number one piece of advice is if you're going to go into real estate, you have to invest in areas that you know. I don't trust appraisals. They make so many mistakes.
People are moving here consistently from California,
It's
New Jersey, New
very
York.
serious. I think we have a great governor to thank for that. Governor DeSantis, did a fantastic job at reopening the state as quickly as possible, letting people get back to work. You don't time the market. Time the seller. I care about what the seller's needs are because, at the end of the day, like I said, if you don't need to sell, you're not going to sell. So it doesn't really make a difference. So like in a street scenario, right, if there's going to be a fight, whoever stays calm, most of the time is going to come out on top. Well, it's the same thing in the business meeting. If you start to get agitated, you're not listening to what the other person is telling you. In a partnership, you're only as good as what you're bringing to the table. I don't care what your contract says. Wow, that was fun traveling the world and, designing collections for both men and women. At a certain point, I had to do what I thought would be better for my financial career.
So, Sebastian Scemla, am I pronouncing that correctly?
It's interesting. I think so. But depending on what part of the world you're from, you're going to pronounce my name differently. But if you're Italian, which half of my family is Italian Jews, it's Scemla, silent C. Other parts of the world is Scemla. So whatever works.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for making time to come on the show today. Really appreciate it. I've been working on this for months, like back and forth, making the time.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And
looking forward to it.
So I'm in the multifamily space, like in real estate. And, coming to Miami a few years ago, I've been seeing like the development market here is insane. It's very hot and it's very saturated now. And you've been in the game for a while. And I wanted to kind of discuss, development, what you think about it. I mean, it's a broad question, but kind of how you got, I guess we'll go back to how you got involved in it and, your recent massive project. I think it's called the Gardens, right?
Yeah, the Gardens of Residences.
So that's 358 units in North Miami Beach, a Class A, like super incredible. You toured me on that property, and I would love to kind of go into how you got that done because people see like this beautiful product and like, oh, wow, must be nice, but they don't understand like probably the sleepless nights you've had, the hard work, the grit, the uncertainty. So I want to go into all that and just kind of, extrapolate from there.
Sure, absolutely. So it's funny you say real estate's a game. I guess life's a game, but it's one thing you said. It's the hard work, right? So I started in the fashion business and running around the United States with my family building stores. And so as I was building these stores, I kind of first understood construction. And from there, I ended up realizing that I was always doing real estate on the side, right? Buying a house, flipping it. As a matter of fact, I built personal homes. I think I built almost 9 homes. And I just built my first home, fixed it up, sold it, made some money, did that 9 times until my wife wanted to kill me, with 3 kids, and it got more and more challenging every single time. So I had some experience, doing like your own little fixer-upper. And then from that point, and I was also doing fashion. And then at one point in my life, I realized that I said, I'm spending 80% of my time in the fashion business, 20% of my time in real estate, but I'm really making 80% of my money from real estate. And 20% of my money from fashion. So while that was fun, traveling the world and, designing collections for both men and women, at a certain point I had to do what I thought would be better for my financial career. So I started dedicating more time to real estate. The Gardens Residence is an interesting development. So look, I've been in Miami my whole life, or since I'm 9 years old. And so my number one piece of advice is if you're going to go into real estate is you have to invest in areas that you know, right? So if you know an area, you have that inside knowledge of what other developers may not see. And so based on that, if I look at the Gardens Residences, I used to take my kids to Miami Country Day School every day. I used to drive up 125th Street and then make a left on, I think that's like 6th Avenue. And then, and I looked at this area and I was like, wow, nobody's buying this area. I wonder, like, why not, right? Like Miami's been an interesting development if you kind of go back in time. I like to say Miami grows like mushrooms, right? You just got like little pockets that kind of come up, right? So
Like Wynwood, right? You were pretty active there.
I was super active in, I was even more active in Design District, right? So I got into the Design District and started buying land there, and I think it was like 2002, 2003. So way before Design District was really anything. Actually, my fashion warehouses were in a Design District. So I was paying crazy, well, what I thought was crazy expensive rent, which was probably nothing compared to now.
Alrighty, quick interruption to the show. We'll be right back in 30 seconds. This show is sponsored by YMW Security. We are a company based out of Florida specializing in security for commercial properties, multifamily, and new development. If you need your property service with armed or unarmed security, or our AI technology cameras and hybrid approach to bringing down the costs and bringing amazing service to your property here in Florida, go to ymwsecurity.com or shoot me an email at y.manacherry@ymwsecurity.com or info@ymwsecurity.com. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the show.
But I was paying crazy rents in a merchandise mart, and I was like, wow, this is kind of nuts. I'm paying too much money. Let me go just find a warehouse somewhere. Don't even ask me. Actually, I do remember, so I said you have to buy neighborhoods that right? And so, as you're driving through Miami or as you're driving through whatever neighborhood you live in, you take your shortcuts, right? And so I ended up in Design District because I was always taking these shortcuts to avoid 95 and to avoid, kind of like the interstates. And, one day I'm driving by and I'm, it's just, there's a lot of traffic and I make a turn, another turn, and somehow I end up in the Design District. And I was having a conversation with my mom, and I'm like, we should really look at buying property and stop paying rent. And we found, for sale by owner warehouse. And
what year was this in?
2000, 2002, 2003.
Mm-hmm. And this is before that you were just buying homes, like your personal
Before that,
homes?
I was just buying homes, fixing them up, and selling them, right? Which was,
So this was your first like commercial play, like real like investment play.
Yeah, but I wasn't even looking at it as like, hey, I'm going to take this and make it into anything bigger. I'm just like, hey, I'm paying, this amount of money in rent, and that can buy me this much building. So why not pay my mortgage instead of paying rent? There was nothing
Build
more
equity
than that.
versus just paying all
That's it. It was just kind of simple. Stop paying rent, start paying down your mortgage. So we found a for sale by owner. We had under contract that night. And we closed on it, 30, 45 days later. And back then, the Design District was, it was rough. I mean, it was really rough. They used to, I used to have a German Shepherd, and my wife wouldn't let me stay in that office unless I had my German Shepherd. They used to steal the copper from the coil in the air conditions, right? Wow. It was, it was rough. Right place, right time, a little bit of luck, and then obviously Design District kind of took off. And I'm a personable guy. So I had retail stores also in the Design District. So I had my warehouse there and I had my retail stores. And actually I used to take my skateboard back and forth from my warehouse to the retail stores, which were right next to Michael's Genuine, right? So there's four people that started the Design District. It was Michael's Genuine. It was my fashion store. It was Hair Dragon, which was like a hair salon. And gosh, I forgot, there was a jeweler, I can't think of his name right now, but it was just the four of us. And, but then it kind of made like this cool little like Melrose thing. And then, we'd all hang out and, and Mike was, was cooking and, I was selling the clothing, and it was a great vibe. The reason I opened up a store there is because I was like, because before that I had stores only in like, the malls, right? Aventura Mall, Ball Harbor shops, all these, malls. And, but I wanted like a cool, like street presence store, right? So that I can really, because I thought that stuff was kind of like too commercial, and I wanted to do stuff that was just like a little bit more edgy, more funky. And that really called for like, an artsy neighborhood, kind of like a street store. So, and so from there, when you're a salesperson, you can really sell anything. It doesn't really make a difference, right? So people would walk in, start asking about the neighborhood. And then I knew all the owners because I'd take my skateboard back and forth from my warehouse to my store. And, I would know all the owners that were around. And, then people started asking me like, hey, do you know anybody that wants to sell property in Design District? And I'd be like, yeah, sure. I can call my buddy and next thing you know, I got my real estate license. And I think in like period of like 2-3 years, I did like over $150 million in transactions in the neighborhood. It was like insane. Like this thing just went like absolutely atomic. It just blew up.
Wow, it's incredible. So that's how you originally, I guess, when you first I'm trying to unravel the whole thing.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot in a little.
Yeah, I'm trying to put it all together. So I guess your first, which is, I feel like a lot of big investors like yourself, they get involved through the brokering side of it because they learn, they learn the seller and the buying. And they kind of look at all the financials and like, oh wow, I should play this game as the buyer, right? So you sold well over 100 million in transactions. Is that where you made your initial capital to go ahead and start like buying more and start investing full time?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And what I would do is that I would, which if you can find the right people, I recommend it. Okay. But a lot of these people I was kind of friendly with, and so. Somebody, like I had a friend that said, hey, help me find something. And I'd say, okay, no problem. And I said, but I'll do it if you let me roll my commission back in. And so I would do that. And on one property, I rolled my commission like 3 times. And so, I could have taken like the initial gratification, and taking my $20,000 or $30,000 I would have made from brokering it the first time. And I turned that into hundreds of thousands of dollars because I just went like, all right, I'm doubling down, I'm putting it on black. I'm doubling down, I'm putting it on black. And I just kind of let it roll and let it roll and let it roll. And then eventually I owned like, a pretty substantial piece. And then when it finally sold at the end, I did pretty well. And so, listen, it's a gamble, right? Like, but, something like, look, for a long time, we've all been saying like, Miami's a special place, but it's like the world has just realized how special Miami is, right? Like, for those of us that have been here I've been in Miami for, I was born in Paris, but I've been here since I'm 9 years old. So not to date myself, but like over 40 years. And we've always known how cool Miami is, right? And it's just like now all of a sudden Miami is just like, Miami is one of the hottest cities in the world, arguably.
Post-COVID, it kind of just blew up.
Just kind of blew up.
Before then, I could be wrong, but I feel like a lot of the real estate guys from outside were always kind of like, Miami's like was kind of Vegas, like up and down, up and down, up and down. And then since COVID, it's just been almost straight up. I mean, rents have softened recently, but I'm saying like because it was so high. But just in general, people have realized it's not like that little bubble it was before, and like it's serious now. Like people are moving here consistently from California, New Jersey, New York.
Serious. I think we have a great governor to thank for that. Governor DeSantis, did a fantastic job at reopening the state as quickly as possible, letting people get back to work. And he's got conservative values and and low taxes, and now he's trying to. Well, we're going to have on a ballot in November to remove property taxes on your homestead property. So there won't be any more real estate taxes that you have to pay on your own property. We think the market is hot now. If that hits, forget about it. And by the way, it's great for everybody, right? Because if you think about it, I don't care if you're buying a $500,000 home and you're going to have, you're going to pay $10,000, $12,000 a year in taxes, right? Or $1,000 a month. Well, how much more does $1,000 a month buy you on a mortgage? So now maybe you were only able to afford a $500,000 home, but now that extra $1,000 a month buys you a $600,000 home, right?
Yeah, it can be huge for a lot of people. It can be huge.
So, and then the other problem that we have down here as well is that if you want to sell your property, right? Like, somebody like me, I've owned my home for a long time. My basis is really low. I can afford a more expensive home, but I don't want to pay silly taxes and throw that money out the window. So I'm staying in my home. I'm choosing not to sell.
It's really interesting you're saying that because I was speaking to someone also recently who bought a home in Bay Harbor many years ago. Let's say less than $1 million, a nice home. And now it's, it's worth over $3 million. He's like, even if I sell it and I get another home for the same price, it's just like I'm going to be paying taxes. $70,000. Yeah, I'm going to be paying taxes on $3 million versus my basis on a homestead in at like $500,000 or $600,000. So it's like you're kind of forced into it. Obviously, like you can probably afford it. Other people can afford to move, but it's like, why should I triple my tax or even more with taxes? So it would be crazy if it did pass.
So DeSantis hopefully is going to be able to unlock that.
Do you think it's likely that's going to happen?
Well, he said it's going to be on the ballot, and so I think we have to get 60% people to vote it.
I think it'll vote for sure. I mean, my question was, I don't know anything.
I don't know
that.
who
I'm just
would
saying
be against it. I'm really trying to think like
saying the city. How is the state of Florida gonna? Because we don't have income taxes, right? So how are they gonna fill that deficit?
Well, don't forget it's only on homestead properties, right? So all commercial properties, right? And anybody that has a second home, right? So I think DeSantis said that we had something like $30 billion in revenue in 2019, and now we're closer to like $55 billion. So our government shouldn't grow that fast, right? I mean, I'm definitely for small government. And I don't think that he's going to do it like, hey, overnight. I think that, he's mentioned about having it, as a like a tiered off process or, over time, so that it's not like a complete shock or whatever the case is. Yeah, listen, you got to have the revenues to be able to pay for the, police officers and the teachers and the parks and all that stuff. But if he's putting it on there, I'm assuming that they have a solution, that they're already thinking about that. So yeah, I mean, and again, so, I mentioned earlier, look, I took a gamble. I invested my commission into a deal, and I rolled it again, and I rolled it again, right? So the other gamble is like, hey, if you're thinking about buying a home, take the gamble. It's going to be on the ballot. Like, think about it. Who doesn't want to pay real estate taxes, right? So all of a sudden, come next November, come next December, there could be a lot more people in the game trying to buy property because everybody can afford a lot more. And people are now actually willing to sell because they're like, okay, now I'm ready for my upgrade. I've been in this home for a long time and I can, right? So if I were to take a gamble, if I was looking at a home, I'm like, now's as good time as any, right? Now, something else also from real estate, from my perspective, is I always say, like, you don't time the market. You time the seller. If I don't need to sell my home or my property, I'm just not going to sell it. I'm just going to wait until whatever that timing is right. Now, you walk into a home and, couple's getting a divorce or, or it's an old couple and they're really ready to size down or whatever. And so, okay. So I've always told, the clients that I work with, and, I just really work with close friends, but we're looking for, I don't care about what the market is doing. I care about what the seller's needs are. Because, at the end of the day, like I said, if you don't need to sell, you're not going to sell. So it doesn't really make a difference. But kind of go back to the Gardens residence, right? So, I do a lot of stuff in Design District. I'm watching Design District is blowing up. I do some stuff in Wynwood as well. I was never a big believer in Wynwood. I did do some things there, but for me, Design District was it, right? Like with Craig Robbins, doing everything that he's doing, and LVMH and, all the big brands there, and I was kind of already entrenched in that neighborhood. I did very little in Wynwood. I did a few deals. And so, I did. And so from there, so it's actually interesting because my whole real estate career has been from my house to my kids' school to the Design District where I used to have my warehouse.
So you really believe in that live local? Because it's a big debate. I mean, a lot of people say local is what you want to focus on, like markets, like you were saying, because you can drive there, you can be there, you can touch the real estate, you can be there every day, you can manage it. And then there's some people who want to come in at a low basis. So they'll buy like in Alabama, Texas, Ohio, and they'll get units for like 30, 40, 50K a door. And they'll just do that at scale. But they're not, they're not having their hands on. They probably have to third-party manage it, or just they're always flying on a plane. So like most people, I feel like, say the same thing as you. Is like, you want to be local. You want to be able to touch it.
I mean, if that works for them, great. But for me, it's always been able to, like, can I drive there? How well do I understand the neighborhood? Like understanding values.
I'm saying that because of high basis. That's why. Because investors listen, can't afford like 200 a door or more in local, like in Miami. So,
listen, for the investor that's starting out, like I said, Miami grows like mushrooms. You got to find the pocket in between the mushrooms, right? And that's how I kind of started my whole career. That's how I ended up in North Miami. By the way, for the investor or for the first-time home buyer, I think that North Miami has the greatest value anywhere. It's super safe neighborhood. I mean, I drive those streets all the time. I'm watching, new homes popping up. You can still pick up a home for $500,000-$600,000 on nice lots, 10, 15,000 square foot lots. Now, for Miami, that's like extremely affordable, right? Do I see those homes? By the way, those homes, when I started my project, they were 200, 180, and now there's, they're 5, 6, 7. And those are $1 million homes in 5 years or less for sure. So, so you gotta, so stay local is what I've always done. I understand neighborhoods. I don't trust appraisals. I think that those guys are, look, they do the best job that they can, but at the end of the day, they get paid a fee per appraisal that they do. And the more appraisals they do, the more money they make. And they make so many mistakes. And so for me, like of course you always get an appraisal and it's like a good kind of like, basic pricing, but I don't really rely on that. I really rely on understanding the neighborhood, understanding, who's selling what, who needs to sell. And that really kind of helps in determining value. So, I end up in North Miami. I'm driving my kids to school. I'm like, hey, nobody's looking at this area. And same thing. I just start making calls and, spoke to a random guy. Hey, I think I was chasing like another property around there and that property sold, but he's like, hey, but call this guy. He might know somebody that wants to sell this property. And I said, okay. I said, I'll tell you what though, if that ever happens and, I'm able to get this property, I said, I'll make sure that you get your commission. And I think that's very important also, in our community, like your word's more important than anything. Right. And so, like never take a dollar away from anybody. Right. Like, at the end of the day, you have to be an honest person, a truthful person. And if somebody gave you a lead or whatever the case is, you have to reward them because, it's a round world. It'll come back. Right. So, and all this person did is like, hey, call this other person. I'm like, okay. I said, look, if anything ever happens, I'll take care of you. I think it was like 2 years later, I called him up and I was like, hey, by the way, I closed on the deal and, here's your commission check. He was like, wow.
Yeah, because you didn't have to do that at all.
You didn't. But like I said, I think that, I do believe in karma. So, you have to do the right thing. Your reputation is everything, right? Like in this, especially in Miami, if you don't have a reputation, you don't have anything. So you got to be a gentleman, right? For me, a gentleman is like just a trustworthy, honest person that doesn't lie. I can go back as far as I want. I don't think there's a single person out there that could say a bad thing about me it's because I always try to do things the right way. So I find this property, in North Miami. It's right next to W.J. Bryan Elementary School. It's like 4.2 acres. It's an entire city block. And they want $4.5 million for it.
For the whole block.
For the whole block. And by the way, back then in 2018, like this is the hood now. Like, I mean, this place was really, really bad, right? The cops were there. Actually, I just came back from lunch and there was a police officer that was there who's a friend of mine. And we were talking about how often the cops were there. But anyways, I ended up buying this property. It had like 48 apartments. It was like just completely dilapidated. It was owned by an old Cuban woman that had a property manager. She was basically senile. And this place was just, so bad. But I was like, I don't care. Because one, I came out of design district and I'm like, okay, I can see how, a piece of rock can turn into a diamond, right? So, and I was like, I can't put an entire city block anywhere. This is for 4 acres, right? I'm like $4.5 million. And I can't find the money. Like, I'm just like everybody's like, dude, that place is a dump. You're crazy. Whatever the case is.
So that's what I want to get like into the mindset. Because people, like I said, people see like the end product and like, oh, wow. Right. They just assume a lot of things. So I love getting into like the head of the developer or the the investor when they were first buying it. Like people probably thought you were crazy, right? So you tidied up and you put money down and then you had to go raise it, or what was going on when you initially purchased it?
So I have a little bit of money from the design district. I put it down as a deposit, and now I just have to go out and find partners. And I can't find the money, and now I'm sitting there. I'm like, am I nuts? Like, I'm really questioning myself. I think I had the land for like $27 a foot or something like that. And at that point, I think I'd been trading dirt in Little River for like 100. So I knew I had value. I'm like, why can't anybody else see what I'm seeing? So I'm stalling. Actually, I got the property under contract. I believe it was like in 18. I didn't close on it till about about 18 months later. I just kept on stalling because
So it wasn't hard. You had ways to extend it and stuff.
Coincidences or God's will or whatever the case is. There was a hurricane, so I think there was 2 hurricanes during the time I had it under contract. So there was like force majeure clause in the contract, so I was able to extend it. And then there was another one. Then there was actually a fire in one of the buildings, and so then I was able to get a little bit of a discount. Then, believe it or not, there was a second building that caught on fire. I mean, like the amounts of ups and downs that I went through with this deal is like, there isn't enough time in this podcast for me to go through all the things that.
Were you sleeping at night well when you had it under contract, or
no?
You were pulling your teeth out trying to get money to get it?
Yeah, you have to you're giving everything. You're just like thinking and going and just doing whatever you got to do. I'm making calls. I ended up finding a partner out of Chicago. Okay. That it was the same thing. Call this guy, call that guy. And I just kept on calling this guy, and he kind of, whatever the case was. And, give me a little bit of time of day. Then sometimes he wouldn't, sometimes he would. And finally I got him to fly down here. He looked at the property and we bought it together. And, I was able to do like a little bit of friends and family. And so like, I got money from a guy that like, I didn't even know. Right. And I had to trust in the fact that, so one thing in a partnership that I always say is the most important part of a partnership is I don't care what the contract says. Because when I went into this deal, I was a really small minority, okay? But I was an instrumental part of this property. Like, I knew everything about this property. I was the one that was collecting rents. Like, if I stepped out of the picture, like this guy would have been like, it was impossible. I mean, I'm literally collecting.
Put in all the sweat equity.
I put in all the sweat equity. And so, so you make yourself indispensable, right? And that's, by the way, it's the same thing with my partners now, right? And I have phenomenal partners, and we have, one of the greatest partnerships I could ever dream of. But for me, in a partnership, you're only as good as what you're bringing to the table. I don't care what your contract says, right? Everybody can sue each other and whatever the case is. That's nonsense, right? So I have to bring my value to the property and to what I do every single day. I'm no longer bringing the value, I'm no longer bringing the work, then at that point, it's like, well, why am I needed, right? So I end up doing this deal with this guy in Chicago. He comes down, we do the deal. I'm running the property. He could do whatever he wants with me. In other words, because he's controlling it, right? I think he was like 75 or 80% of the deal, and I was just, small 20%. But I was collecting the rents, I was like knocking on doors. I mean, this was.
You told me
like,
you were going there at night, like.
Yeah, this was like drug infested. The cops were there every week. There were shootings there all the time. I mean, I used to go there, literally, packing heat. I had to beat up pickup trucks so that people would know I had, and I would just, I looked like I don't want to say I looked like a bum, but I didn't, I wasn't dressed up or anything of that sort, and every day just go knocking, and it was, there was a 2-bedroom, there were 2-bedroom, 1 bath. And I was getting anywhere, like when I really increased the rents, I think I was getting $850 a month, right? So it was challenging. For 2 years, I did that. What happened was, at a certain point, this guy kind of got frustrated, and he says, there was a conversation, and there was like an opening, and for me to buy him out. He goes, "Why don't you just buy me out?" And I said, "Okay, what's the number?" And he gave me the number, and I said, "Okay." And I'm like, okay, now I have to go find the money again. And so I'm back at it. I did,
Was he like threatening to sell it if not, or he was just like, "Hey, I want out"?
He was just kind of frustrated with it. And again, it goes back to like, look, if I was some guy up in Chicago, not understanding the dynamics, not having my finger on the pulse, not really knowing what's going on, I might do the same thing. Right? Like I've invested in other deals, right? I've invested in deals outside of, driving distance. I've never done well on those deals. I don't do well. It's very hard because one, you don't understand the neighborhood. You can't drive there. You have to trust certain people, and not everybody is trustworthy, unfortunately, to make decisions for you. And maybe it's not that they're not even trustworthy, but it's all that they know. They don't have enough knowledge of it. They're busy. They make mistakes or whatever the case is. So, So I kind of lost my train of thought. But, so I do this
Saying
deal.
for the reason, like you were saying, the reason why he didn't necessarily see the value.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much.
He was living in Chicago.
Because he's in Chicago and he didn't see the value. But I'm starting to see things kind of happening. So I go out there, I raise the money, and eventually my current partners and we bought him out. But I'll tell you, you were talking about like the amount of stress that deal put me through was, at every single, in my gut, I knew like this is a once in a lifetime deal. So like I was ready, like I was taking this, like I ended up actually, coincidence or not, but I ended up in the hospital for about a week with Bell's palsy and one other thing because of the amount of stress that I was under. So like my whole right side of my face and my shoulders, it got completely paralyzed. I couldn't walk I couldn't even walk around the block of my house. I'm a healthy, fit guy, but like it was so much pressure, so much stress that my body's like, dude, you need to like take a chill pill. And and I remember being in the hospital, and I'm talking to this guy in Chicago. He says, are you still buying me out? I said, 100%. Like, meanwhile, I'm in the hospital the day before I was on morphine, because I was in so much pain. And I was like, but I knew, again, like I knew that this, like, it's logical, right? It was like, why North Miami? Well, it's simple, right? Like you got downtown on First Street, Aventura 200th.
You're right in the middle of everything.
You're right in the middle. You got 95, and then you have, the beaches. Like I basically bought the epicenter of all of Miami. It's like so central, right? And by the way, like, I don't know, Tom Brady, Jeff Bezos, they're all driving home from 95.
Everyone's passing that street. 5 minutes from Bay Harbor.
Yeah. So, really well located. And yeah, I mean, now we have like some incredible developments. We have great restaurants. We did a deal with Tesla. They're doing, I think, 12 Superchargers over there. As a matter of fact, they recognize, Tesla doesn't do anything just out of coincidence, right? They do a lot of studies, right? Like they know exactly.
How does that work? Go back to Tesla. Like you just mentioned that. How do they find you guys, or do you find them with the chargers?
So same thing. I call a friend, he says, hey, why don't you try this guy or whatever? And, it took us, and then we finally got to, a Tesla representative. And it took, I think, 4 years to do a deal with Tesla. It took them it took 2 years for them to answer. And finally they're like, oh yeah, actually this is a great neighborhood.
Now it's at the property.
So yeah, it's actually funny because, so we do a deal with them, we sign the lease. And once you sign a lease with Tesla, it has a 6-month clause to say, hey, we can back out at any time for 6 months. So you really don't have a deal until like 6 months and a day. So 6 months and a day comes, I'm like, sweet, we got a deal with Tesla. They're going to put their superchargers there. And then I think a couple of days later, Elon's like, I'm not doing any more superchargers. He fired half the company. And I was like, whoa, dude, and so then you're like, okay, and back to, and then I was like, but I got a lease with them. What am I going to do? I'm going to sue Tesla. I can't sue Tesla, right? And then we're like, all right, no Tesla. And then a year later, all of a sudden, he's like, okay, I'm back and I'm open up everything. And because we were sending emails and everything was bouncing. So we have no more contacts, no one to be able to speak to or whatever. And finally we get an email. And they're like, hey, we're back. We're gonna move forward on your lease. We're like, hey, fantastic. And now they actually came back to us and they're like, we realize that there's huge demand for Tesla superchargers in your neighborhood. We like to triple the capacity. We like to be able, because they effectively rent this parking spaces from you.
Yeah, the only one they have is by Target on Biscayne, and I know a million people who go there panicking, get off the freeway, and they're like, oh, it's full.
Yeah.
Like.
So they've asked us to triple the capacity, and we're like, well, let's just start off with what we have and let's see how it goes. And they're like, okay, fine, but we're going to triple the transformer capacity because we know the demand's going to be there in the future. And so, they actually, tripled the size of their transformers for future capacity to be able to do more superchargers over there. And I think that's going to be a wonderful relationship. We have some great restaurants that are coming in.
Yeah, because also I saw you across from the property in the front, you're building a lot of retail space, right?
Yeah, so what we did is we bought 4 acres on 126th Street. And I'll tell you why that property is super special. because it's surrounded by all residential homes, right? So it's actually it's one street off a main road. So it's really quiet, okay? And the views are forever unobstructed. And so the reason we kind of call it the gardens or the gardens in the sky is because, you know, when you're inside like any of those units, right, all you see is just like green treetops. That's it. You know, and those views, because it's a residential neighborhood, they'll never be built in front. So it's special because, you know, it's much more quiet, and then you just have forever unobstructed views. And it's really cool. Actually, you see like parrots flying around because it's a very like lush green area.
No, it's beautiful. I remember you toured me there. It's like a beautiful pool there. You have like a sauna over there. You have a super nice gym.
Yeah.
The residents are just hanging out by the pool. Like
we
cool
built a really I think we did a really special building. You know, so, you know, as you take on partners, at one point, you know, finding money was no longer the problem. So then it was about taking on strategic partners, right? People that really add value. So Robert Behar, who's a very close personal friend, who's my partner in basically all my developments now. He's an incredible architect. He's the one that he just got Architect of the Year. He built the Ocon Tower. He's building the Ocon Tower, which is, I think, the largest, the tallest tower south of the Empire State Building. And so along the way, we started taking on strategic partners. And, you know, so I take on Robert as a partner. Now he's no longer just about the fee, but he's really connected to the project, right? So one of the things that we did, and I think when we toured the property, I showed you, is like, you know, huge windows, floor to ceiling, okay, a lot of glass, right? We didn't cut back on anything. Huge balconies, right? We were building this during COVID, right? So like outdoor space became important. So like, you know, the amount of balcony space that we have is like, it's second to none, right? Like on a rental property, I think we have, you know, some of the corner units, I think, have like 120 linear feet of balcony space. Like, wow. On a rental property, where do you find that, right? But, you know, like it almost in a way, we were designing this during COVID. And so we were almost kind of building like a dream building, because like we didn't know where the world was going or where the case is. And I'm like, well, people want to be outside, so just give them big balconies or whatever. And it's like, well, you know, how are we going to afford that? I'm like, we'll figure it out when the time gets there, right? But actually, you know, so we, you know, again, like being from the neighborhood and being able to, you know people and know people that know people and having a good reputation, you know, we started working with the North Miami CRA. Rasha Kamo, who was the CRA director back then, who I'm, you know, basically forever indebted to or grateful for, saw my vision, saw the kind of person that I was. And so the city helped me with $8 million in grants. And that the grants are just like straight up money that came towards the construction. And an additional $7 million in tax increment financing. We call that TIF money, okay? So, you know, I'll kind of come back to this, but, you know, how did I find this money? Well, I just started reading, right? I just like started going on the websites. Somebody told me about a CRA. What is a CRA? And then I basically, you know, did a public records request, and I just started reading everything about the CRA, right? Like their whole charter, all their amendments. I knew everything about the CRA. And, you know, when I presented my project, I'm like, look, I brought a police report. I'm like, here's how many times the cops have been here, right? You know, CRA is there to remove slum and blight. Here's the project that we're going to do. And I need you to trust me that I'm going to deliver on my word. And she did. And now because of her, you know, we have this kind of like amazing transformational project that's there. So we got $8 million in grants and $7 million in tax increment financing. So what does that mean? Tax increment financing means it's pretty simple. Basically, the property real estate taxes used to be, call it $60,000. Okay. Today, I think our current taxes now are, call it $1.6 million, right? So we've increased the real estate taxes by about $1.5 million, okay? And so we get to share on the increase with the city of North Miami, right?
Oh,
So
wow.
it's actually, it's really genius. When it's done right, and I think that we've done a really good job with it, right? The CRA, had this property that was making them only, 60,000, only a portion of
What does
$60,000.
CRA stand for again?
Community Redevelopment Agency. And so, but as a concept, right, you have like a slum and blight property. It pays no real estate taxes. Okay. So the city or the CRA comes up with, they're like, okay, we're going to front load the money. But now the real estate taxes are $1.6 million and they're going to grow at 3% forever. Right. So yeah, they're giving me $7 million, but how quickly are they going to make that money back? And then after that, it's just like, right. And at the same time, we're bringing new residents. Right, they're going to spend money in town. We're bringing new businesses. We're bringing new restaurants. So they're going to, and so now you're just, you're creating, an
Creating real value.
Yeah, you're creating an entire neighborhood. And so, we bought the first 4 acres, and then then my partner pushed me. He's like, well, if we're already doing this, we got to buy more. So then we ended up buying everything on 125th Street, which is right in the front. And then we bought all the commercial properties there, right? And so we're calling the whole neighborhood. So now I think we have about 7.
Is that where the pickleball course, pickleball,
exactly.
So you own that too?
No, we don't own that. That's a buddy of ours.
That's right next door.
Yeah, that's right next door. But we own everything. We own 1125, 1111, and 1075. And so, now we're kind of like, we really created like a live, work, play, right? Like we have office spaces. We're building out, 6 or 7 restaurants. We have Tesla supercharging stations, and then you have, the Gardens Residence where people can live. Gardens Residence is super, really special property because we're not sellers, right? Like I know that I can't ever put this together anywhere else, right? I mean, like maybe I could, but
There's a lot of people they're like incentivized to sell because they can get that money right back in quick and it's easy versus kind of like you were saying before in Wynwood when you just held it's like kind of delayed gratification where you kept the money and you kept the money and you kept the money in.
And it's
like
tough.
With this, like it's not easy. You probably have a big mortgage to pay and you have a lot of stress, but you're like, no, I'm holding this long. This is going to be a huge play for your family long term also.
I like to say I earned my white hair. And by the way, like we really even haven't made like the real money yet, right? Like, hopefully we're going to get our HUD loan in the next, couple months, and then we'll get a nice cash out and we'll be in a good position. But we've invested, a tremendous amount of money, a tremendous amount of time, but that's it. The neighborhood has changed, right? Like the demand to be in North Miami because it's so central, and also because, hey, we're the best value-driven product anywhere. Period.
And what are rents going for like a 2-bedroom, 2-bath right now?
So a 2-bedroom, 2-bath will be around. So we have we have 3 levels of units. We call it core, premium, premium plus, right? So like a core unit, you might have one that starts around 27 and change. And then a premium plus unit could be like $3,700, right? So depending on balcony space, are they getting like glass shower doors? I mean, look, the unit in itself, all the units are really nice.
And
right?
the amenities. What are the amenities again?
The amenities is we did a really nice gym, right? So obviously fitness. So we did a great gym. We have sauna and cold plunges. We did a Peloton room. We have outdoor yoga. We did a track around the whole piece of property where people kind of, run, and a
massive
pool deck.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like, I think we have and again, the architect made sure like our pool deck is never in the shade, right? A lot of developments also, because they don't have the space, they end up doing like these like square buildings and then they put the pool in the middle. But then you're always looking at like your neighbor that's like right across, because it's all like internally faced. And then the pool's always in the shade. Like, we have a resort style pool that I don't care where you go anywhere around the world, it's a beautiful infinity edge pool. And we built like these beautiful outdoor barbecues overlooking the pool. The whole thing is
I'll put a link for everyone listening. If you're on Spotify or Apple, so you can check it out. Like, the whole property, the website. Yeah,
and so because we're not selling, right, when we built this building, we did it as long-term holds, right? So now look, I have never built anything other than a 600,000 square foot building. Like I did fixer-upper homes, right? But my first project I don't think I've told many people this, but at this point now it's built, so we did it. But my first project is 635,000 square foot building, right? So, but look, the number one thing for the listeners that are out there is like, it's so much work, okay? But at the same time, if you're enjoying it, then is it really work, right? So like, I made it, early on when I took this partner from Chicago, okay, this guy knew so much more than I did. I knew nothing, right? And I remember we had hired an attorney because we wanted to do a development or whatever the case is. It was a local zoning attorney. And, I'd sit in these meetings and I was lost. I was like, oh my God, and I would sit there and I'd take notes. I'm like, what does this abbreviation stand for, whatever the case is. And at night I would just go home and read building code, right? I mean, I've literally read
self-taught.
100%. So, I have read that North Miami building code. There's, other than the building director and the zoning director, I don't know if there's anybody else out there has read it as many times as I have. I mean, I read the whole thing back to, front to back multiples of time. And so I used to sit in these meetings with this guy from Chicago, a big time attorney from one of the, fancy law firms, won't mention names, and myself. And then little by little now, I've learned more stuff about the codes. And then next thing I find the attorney asking me questions on zoning code. And I was like, she's asking me questions. I'm like, why am I paying her all this crazy money? So eventually, when I bought out the partner, we got rid of her because I couldn't afford her. And I said, well, you know what? I don't think we're going to need a zoning attorney. I'm going to do everything myself. So, I just scrapped it out. I mean, I was, and North Miami has incredible staff. Like, that's one of the things that, I really, I'm grateful for and very humble for all their help. But, they all guided me and they all wanted me to be successful, right? It was kind of like everybody was rooting for like, the local guy. But at the same time, like it was nothing for nothing. Like I don't want to say like, I showed them that I was doing the work. I showed them like, like I wanted to do proper development and that, I read the city's entire comprehensive plan, so that I'm like, hey, look, this is what your comprehensive plan says. And so I'm delivering exactly what they said. And they were like, wow, thank you. And, and then, it's about, delivering on your promises. Right. And so, as long as inside you're like, you know what, like, I don't know how I'm going to deliver my promises, but I'm going to have to, because I'm telling people that I will, eventually you just figure out how to get there. Right. And like, you just got to have like this crazy drive to just want to just succeed, whether it's because of your ego or whether it's because you don't want to let people down or because, whatever the case is. And at the same time, like I said, though, it's like, I'm like, wow, this is fun. Like, this is kind of cool. Like little by little, I get one little win and another little win and another little win, and, you rely on all your contacts and, everybody that helps you along the way. And so when the city gave me the $8 million to build, a lot of developers would have said, okay, I got this money. I'm going to, like, where do I cut corners, right? Or, maybe pocket some of the money, or I don't know we invested all that money and then some back into the building, right? So we put like, so I did my own market study, right? I didn't hire any companies or whatever the case is, but I went to all my friends that were renting units. I'm like, hey, what do you like about your unit, or what don't you like? And so one buddy says, you know what? My neighbors are really loud. I hate hearing my neighbors. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And then I asked somebody else, and I kept on getting this neighbor thing a lot. And so
I'm dealing with it right now on a property in Bay Harbor.
You're dealing with
they're complaining about one of the tenants keeps calling saying, I can hear these people, they're screaming at night, they're fighting, this and I can hear right through the walls, paper thin.
So that's one of the things that we did is,
like
I'm like, and it wasn't so expensive to do.
You just did like extra insulation, like rock wool?
Or so basically what we did is, there's a minimum decibel reading in South Florida. I think it's like 54, 56 decibels. It's like the minimum sound transmission from one unit to the next. And so I said, all right, look, we got to leave money to be able to have better soundproofing. We use something that's called both the insulation and something that's called a resilient channel that gets mounted on top of the studs. And I can show you,
Do people think you're crazy when you're talking about this?
I obsessed about like every single nook and cranny of that building, like everything. Like, I mean, I can, I learned, fire systems and and pounds of pressure for the water to make sure that the fire system, sprinkler system works. And I worked with, the fire department and testing all the fire systems. I mean, like everything, like, listen, that's what it takes. Like, if like, at least for me, right? Because like I said, we're not selling this. Like, we're excited about transforming a neighborhood. It's fun. Like, I'm there every day, right?
Yeah, I saw last time when I was there, you were literally working on
great
plans.
Restaurants every day. I like you said, I go to Home Depot on the weekends, and I'm like, and I'm buying fresh plants for my property, and this is like an extension of my home. I have a lot of my friends and that live in the building, and a lot of tenants that have become my friends as well, because they're always seeing me hanging around there. And so, it's so it's exciting. So, we did things like soundproofing. The women were like, well, when I go like in a lot of these rental buildings, it's just like a shower. We did a shower head, obviously a rain shower head, and a handheld, because a lot of the women, when they go out at night or whatever, and they don't want to like get their hair wet, so we did a handheld every shower. We did illuminated mirrors because, when the women are doing their makeup, I actually selected a mirror that had like, different Kelvin settings, based on your because I see that my wife and my daughters, they set their mirrors up differently with the lighting when they do their makeup. Are they going like, is it office or is it at night? Because then it's different shading or whatever the case is. So, we took all these little details that we've added to the residences to make it like, the best possible living experience, because we're not selling, right? And because we're self-managing the property, turnover costs money, right? So like, tenant wants to leave because the neighbor is loud. Okay. So that unit, I have to, now maybe repaint it, fix it up. I'm going to lose it. I'm going to lose rent.
Stay on the market for a month or two.
Right. It stays on the market for a month or two or whatever the case is. Right. And it's like, well, why? So like, we self-manage the building, and the clients or the tenants are happy and they stay. And so like, you front load these things, it costs more money. But at the end of the day, it pays its dividends, right? So it's like kind of the third time I'm like, yeah, you got to front load it. It's like, you don't take the money out now, you kind of let it sit, and you let it kind of, pay its dividends. Well, it's the same thing when we invested the money into having all these little details, right? Like, people really appreciate our building. It's a really well-maintained building. The other thing that we noticed is like, these management companies, they're terrible.
Oh, they just want their fee, and they'll do the minimum.
Right. And so that's one of the things. And then the other thing is that, these management companies just hire employees, right? And these employees don't really care. They're there and they're making a salary or whatever the case is. And maybe they get some kind of bonus or whatever the case is. But most of the time, these employees are there for a year and then they're gone, right? But, in this building, we manage this property, right? So like, we're here today, we're here tomorrow. So I used to go to like, want to do visits for these other, buildings, the competition, whatever the case is. And like, I wouldn't get a call back for 3-4 days. And here I'm like, like I sometimes call, my building. I'm like, wait, why isn't anybody picking up? Okay. Yeah, they did pick up. Good. But we're always, so we're on it, right? Like, that's kind of like the retail.
You think that's the most important when it comes to like efficiency in real estate is the management, right? Because a lot of people say like it's all in the details, and I really think so too. Like, even if you buy something at a good basis and you're able to push rents and you build a nice product, or what we do, a value add, and you're able to like create value and make it nicer. Like, if you don't manage that thing well, if you don't pay attention, like you're saying, if a tenant comes and no one gets back, a potential prospect tenant comes, you don't get back to them, or you don't fix a complaint, or you don't fix something, or you're not on top of the details, and you have a third party management company, then that's going to ruin your retention rate, which is going to be more turnovers, there's going to be more punch out, painting and sitting on the market, and that multiplies and compounds like over the years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, and then the tenants don't stay, because then they make a complaint. They're like, hey, my light's not working or whatever the case is, and nobody's fixing it, right? And then like, when their lease is up, they're out. Yeah. And our goal is customer service, customer retention. I come from a hospitality background as well, and so, it's always about the customer experience. At the end of the day, like, that's the most important thing. These are your customers. You got to make them happy. Now, anybody that's been in the restaurant business or anything else, you can't make every customer happy, right? But as long as you can make a good majority of them happy, right? And that's the other thing, though, when you're self-managing, right? So let's just say I have 2 tenants that want to renew, right? And you come in and you're like, hey, I want to renew, and you've been a great tenant. You're not loud. You always pay your rent on time, or whatever the case is. I'm going to renew you, and I'm probably going to, renew at a great rate, because I'm like, hey, if I have to take his unit and put it on the market and, have to paint and lose a couple months or whatever the case is, why? I have a great tenant here. So I'm going to keep him, And then the flip side is that you're a pain in the ass. I'm always getting complaints. I don't care if you're paying me an extra $500 for that unit. I don't want you, because you're causing more headaches for all the, for all my good customers. So, so we weed out,
because you have your hand on the pulse. You know exactly what's going on.
We have a pulse, right? And so, the whole building is run basically by my partners' families. And so, like we're a big Cuban office, right? It's like the Cubans and mostly in the Jews. And in my office, I think I have, I don't even know, like 13 family members from one of my partners. And so, it's awesome. And it comes with its own, caveats or whatever the case is. Yeah. But overall, overwhelmingly, it's great, because everybody is, committed to making, to having great property, well-run property, and having customers that are happy. And, I think we do a really good job at that.
Very cool. And then what do you think was the hardest challenge, and the hardest challenge in general for development? It's what most people won't understand until they actually develop like you did. A lot of people fantasize about it, talk about it, something I want to eventually do. But I'm curious what you think. What do you think people don't have? Like, what is it that people don't have? Like, what it takes to do it? Like, what's like the hard thing that most people can't deal with?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you that, like, in terms of like all the steps, right? Like, acquiring, zoning, finding loans, construction, lease up, all kind of like the different stages. The hardest thing is believing in yourself and the work ethics. That's the hardest part, right? When I took on my partners, I looked at them in the eye and I said, look, if we're going to be partners, I said, I want you to know one thing. I said, you can't outwork me, right? And that's still my motto today. You can't outwork me. You may say you can outwork me. You might want to tell me that you can. I'm telling you right now, you can't. But if you really believe that you can outwork me, then I'm going to tell you, then we're going to make a lot of money. Because at the end of the day, it just takes work. And, and that's like, if it takes, you got to believe in yourself, right? You got to hold yourself accountable. You're going to figure it out. You're going to figure it out, right? Like, you put yourself, like I say, never back anybody into a corner, right? Like, like I basically backed myself into a corner, and I was like, look, I don't have a choice. Like I have like everything on the line on this building, right? Like I had basically, it made me or it breaks me, but there was nothing else, right? Like, every possible favor I could have pulled, like every single thing I could have thought of or I could think of, I have done, and that's the hardest part, because anything else, look, I believe that, at the end of the day, most people out there are smart people. Okay. The main difference is one's going to work harder than the other. That's it. If you're an attorney, like, yeah, well, what'd you do? Well, you studied more than I did, right? Or if you're an engineer, well, what'd you do? Well, you went to school and you studied more than I did, right? And so at the end of the day, I look at we're all the same. We all come from one place, from the will and from the word of God. And so I look at us as we're all the same, but some people want things easier and other people are going to go out there and hustle and work to get it. So that's what it takes. And, and it's not easy. And by the way, it's like, I don't care how many people you ask that are like, people that are really self-made, they've all struggled. They all had to, put everything on the line and, and just figure it out and just, and, it's like sink or swim, right?
Yeah.
You're going to swim. You don't have a choice.
Yeah, most people, they get home from their 9 to 5 and they just watch Netflix or chill or do the easy thing. Like, they don't delay gratification. They don't, like Alex Hormozi, he's like a very successful guy on social media, and he talks about how kind of what you're saying. Most people are smart and most people are capable, but they just don't put in the work. They're not willing to do what other people are willing to do. Like he's like, you have your 9 to 5, then you're 5 to 9. So at night, like I'm always working on other contract, other things like full time in real estate. And then I also have a security company that, gives like armed and unarmed security to multifamily buildings. And that I built like doing at night and with a partner and every second during the day when I'm not doing my main time thing. So it's just like putting in that extra work, what a lot of people aren't willing to do. Like, and I can't even imagine what you went through developing that thing.
But if you have a passion for it, right? Like if you're really excited, so like don't go into real estate if you're not, like if you don't like it, then don't go into it because you're not gonna be successful, right? But if you like it, then and you put in that work, but you got to have that passion, because when you have that passion, then it's no longer work. Like on Friday nights after Shabbat dinner, I would open up my laptop and I would read building code, and I would read building code till like 2:00 in the morning.
That's
and I would wake up at 7:00 in the morning. I'd open up that laptop and I'd just be reading building code, right? But the amount of money that I basically create out of thin air by understanding the code and understanding like certain things I can do, and and its benefits or whatever the case is, or different like parking reductions, or like common thing in the industry. They're always like, if you go above 8 stories, right, you're high rise and the costs go up, right? Like I had always heard that, right? So I'm building this building, and they're like, and why? Well, you have to have, different piling system, and, and you have to have like different evacuation systems for the elevators or whatever the case is for the pressures. And so when I built my building, we ended up being 9 stories, and I'm like, well, guys, I've been told that 8 stories is the max we can go. When you go to 9, it's going to cost an arm and a leg. Not true. Sometimes yes, but it really it depends on a lot of things, right? Like it's what's the foundation, like what's the earth below you, and that's the most important part. Like how dense is the earth, and the kind of pilings that you have to put. And turns out that North Miami has great foundation to build on, and we built basically that whole building without pilings, but just on what's called spread footers. And so we were able to go 9 stories. And so, like, don't just listen to what everybody says, but then do your homework, right? And make sure, understand why, just be curious.
Yeah. Because I was saying, what you were saying, desert by the water. He's building the Bentley right now. And I think he poured like an insane amount of concrete.
Yeah, I saw
They had like
that.
2 or 3 days straight of hundreds of trucks just pouring concrete. So you being a developer, is it because it's less stable and dense, the earth there, because it's next to the beach? Like, what's the reasoning why?
Yeah, I would have to assume so, but you do your
Your site survey or whatever it is, right?
Yeah. And, and they basically take a drill and they core drill down, and then they just take like the compaction of the earth down there. And then from there, the engineers can figure out what kind of foundation you're going to need or whatever the case is.
And what do you think about a lot of conspiracies? I mean, it's already a while ago, but the Surfside collapse.
Yeah. So that's on my street. I was there that morning. I actually walked outside and I was getting, actually crazy story. My mom was in that building having wine with her friend till about 1:00 in the morning.
No
and then
way.
she came home. And her friend, thank God, came out as well. But the building itself, poor maintenance. At the end of the day, I mean, we know that the concrete that was from like the 70s and 80s wasn't the greatest concrete, and and then you have rebar, and then the rebar rusts, and when it rusts, it basically like explodes. And so, I just think that, look, I don't know what the final results were, and I think it's hard to kind of blame one thing, but I think with proper maintenance, if they would have spent the money to take care of the spalding of the concrete, of the rebar, that building would probably still be up today. But just years of not wanting to spend the money to maintain a property is probably the reason that happened.
Yeah, because assessments went crazy in the area, right? Like right around that building.
Yeah.
Because I was also there that night. I was on 89th Street. I was a few buildings over sleeping. I woke up in the morning and it was craziness. I mean,
Yeah.
It was like fire department was there. You couldn't get into that area for like a solid month almost. So you had to have an ID. That whole thing was crazy. I mean, I finished off, I guess, on two subjects because I know I've had you here for over an hour already, but I'm learning so much. And it's an incredible story. So with jiu-jitsu, I mean, we both, love training jiu-jitsu. I know you train at Valente, and you just got your black belt, you said.
I did. So, it's interesting because my journey in real estate has been on the same parallel as my jiu-jitsu journey. So I train at the Valente Brothers here in North Miami Beach. And it's a very special school.
Super nice school.
Yeah. Aside from the fact that it's really nice, the principles of that school is like nowhere I've ever seen or heard of. It's really something that is very unique. They work on 5 principles, and the 5 principles are philosophy. That's number 1, right? So like, what does that mean? What's philosophy, right? Like, people think martial arts, right? Can I defend myself? Yeah. Well, can I defend myself, but can I talk my way out of something? Like, why do I have to even defend myself if I can talk my way out of something, right? So really, like, the philosophy, the self-defense, the stand-up self-defense from a surprise attacker, the grappling, the striking, and the throwing, right? Those are like kind of like the 5 foundations, the 5 pillars of that school. And recently in my black belt test, I really made the correlation that, my life has completely changed since I started jiu-jitsu. And an extremely positive, right? Like I look at like my business career, how I kind of took off, and, coincidence or not, I started jiu-jitsu right around the same time. Now, listen, I've always been kind of like successful, but, I went from fashion to a real estate developer. Like I started like something completely new. I had no idea. In the fashion, I was with my family, and, there was a lot of help there, but like real estate, like that was all me, all on my own. So, and one, like the 3 brothers, right? You have Pedro, Guy, and Joaquin. The 3 brothers are all incredible guys. And they're all about, just, being a wholesome, honest individual. And I mean wholesome, I mean like in every sense of the word, right? Like mind, body, soul, spirit. You really have to be like a grounded individual. And so, it's helped me out in a lot of ways where, maybe in the past, if I mean like correlating to business, of course, in the past, I get into an argument with somebody or whatever the case is. And like, my ego tells me, no, I'm right. And he's thinking he's right or whatever the case is. And we kind of let both our egos get in the way. And then in the business meeting, like we don't get anywhere. Right. And I walk away and I'm like, aha, my ego. And I'm, but at the end of the day, like, what did I really get out of that meeting? Right. And so what jiu-jitsu has taught me is just, so like in a street scenario, right? If there's going to be a fight, whoever stays calm, most of the time is going to come out on top. Right. Well, it's the same thing in the business meeting, right? You get frustrated or whatever the case is. Okay. And, if you start to get agitated, you're not listening to what the other person is telling you. Right. So, staying calm, staying in the moment, staying kind of like in the pocket. Sometimes it hurts, like emotionally, like, this guy just insulted me or whatever the case is. But I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to listen. Because at the end of the day, he's giving me all the tools that I need, and he's giving me all the information for me to negotiate a better deal. If I could just sit down and shut up and listen to what he has to say, whether he's screaming at me or not, he's giving me all the tools that I need. So then I can be like, you know what? I've heard what you said. Thank you very much. And I've stayed calm. Maybe he got angry. Maybe now he feels like a fool because he got angry. And I walk away. And then next time I go back to him, I said, last time we met, you gave me these 3 things. So I thought about it. And I said, and maybe you're right. And now I have a different strategy, right? Like, my grandfather always said, when one door closes, the other one can open, right? So another one can open. Sometimes, in these, business negotiations, like it's okay to walk away and not get a deal at the moment. Sometimes you need to walk away. You need to absorb what he says. By the way, he could be right. Most of the time he probably is. Right. But you're so much in your head, in your own ego, that you're not kind of paying attention to the details. So, so it's been a 10-year journey. I'll say that, like you become a black belt and then you're just like, wow, I got a lot to learn.
Yeah.
Like when you actually get there, and people are like, wow, that's amazing. I'm like, listen, it's not anything that anybody that doesn't dedicate 10 years and hard work can't do.
Yeah.
Right. But really like, okay, yeah. So now I'm a Valente Brothers black belt. One, it's a tremendous amount of responsibility, because, I represent, the brothers in the school. So my actions that I do on a day in, day out reflect, who I am as a person and also representing them as a school. But then you just realize like I just want to learn more.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, I feel the same way. Like you were saying before, like when you got to black, you felt like I have so much to learn. Like I'm getting close to becoming a pro belt from training for well over 5 years now, almost 6, I think. And the more I train, the more I feel like, wow, I don't know anything. Like, you know what I mean? Maybe like white to blue, you're like, oh, wow, once you get your blue belt, you think you're so good. And then like you start getting smashed as a blue belt and you're like, oh my God, I don't know anything. So I can't imagine at your stage, like black. They say you restart again. That's what they say, but
it is. Like, you can't wait to get your blue belt. And then when you get your purple, you're like, wow, I get my purple. And then, kind of like the brown belt came out of nowhere. And I'm like, okay, I'm cool being a brown belt, and all of a sudden you're asked to be tested for black belt and you're like, okay, I'm going to do it. But, it's pretty nerve-wracking, right? Like it's not an easy test by any means whatsoever. I basically, and I love the experience, but I was living in that school for the last 90 days. I was there at breakfast, I was there at lunch, I was there at dinner. I was there, 4 or 5 times a day, sometimes even more.
How does the Valente Brothers black belt test work? Because a lot of schools, like traditional, won't necessarily be a school. Like it will just be like, hey, the coach thinks you're ready. They'll give you the belt after X amount of years, or when they think you're ready, based on your skill set, based on your athleticism, et cetera, et cetera. So how does it work there?
So the first thing is it's not based on your athleticism, right? Like, yeah, I'm a big, strong guy, but at the end of the day, like I think just anywhere in martial arts, it's based on what your abilities are, right? So my abilities may not be the same as yours, or it may not be the same as, maybe an 87-year-old that's at the school, right? So the belt is based on the person's, ability. Their black belt test, it's a secretive test. You're not allowed to discuss what happens.
Okay.
But I can say that, you go in a room in front of, 50, 60 black belts, and you're tested, and basically they judge you. And so they make the decision. Some of these black belts, other ones you don't, because they fly in from all over the world. And so during your test, they look at you as who you are as an individual. And do you deserve to have a Valente Brothers black belt? Not because you can defend yourself, but who are you as a person? What do you represent? Are you a guy, I stopped drinking, I don't smoke, I don't drink coffee. These are things that I've let go along the way, to be a better version of myself, right? Now, I'm still working process, but, I've cut out sugars, or at least desserts, and like all things, like I like challenging myself, right? Like, and so, you get the black belt and you're like, it's like, you work really hard to get to it. And now I have it. And I'm like, all right, what's the next challenge? Right. Like, I'm kind of like, like you got to
take out a Muay Thai now. I can add Muay Thai.
No, I'm not. I'm going to continue to go to that school, and, and I don't know what is next. Like now, so I just started reading Napoleon, right? So like, I want to understand like, his strategies and what he did or whatever the case is. But now, like, like I told you earlier, it's like, I just want to learn more. So, in general, we want to keep, as we grow old, we just want to learn more, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, where can it just give me more information? I just want to like, learn more.
I love it. Yeah. So I guess to finish off the episode, like, what do you think is the most important for somebody young listening, somebody in their 20s or even 30s who like feels like they can do more? Like there's more to what they're doing. They're working a job they're not happy with, but they don't necessarily have the capital to go out and start real estate, but they want to do real estate, or not even necessarily real estate. I guess anything in general. They want to do that extra thing. They want to take on a hobby, like let's say jiu-jitsu, or they want to do something they feel like they're meant for. Like, do you think it's just be curious and determined, or I always like to end it off like what's your advice? What would you tell your kids?
So listen, I put all my kids through jiu-jitsu, especially my girls, right? Like, so I highly recommend it. If you have girls, and I actually started jiu-jitsu because I was taking my girls there. for many years. Because, as a father, you want to make sure your girls are always safe. And then I put them through another kind of big wave before they went to college. I'm like, hey, you guys want to go away to college? You got to learn how to defend yourself. So I sent them back. So they went for a period like 4 or 5 years when they were kids, and then, for like 1 or 2 years before they went away to college. And same thing with my son. But at the end of the day, look, it's their journey. And so, I try to, encourage what I think is best for them, but I let them be what they want to be. For people that are out there, I would say, yeah, listen, from a personal level, like just look to be a better version of yourself. Look to improve on yourself and, whatever that is. It could be anything. Listen, just have passion, right? Like, my tagline when I was in fashion business was live with passion, right? Because I said it earlier, it's like, look, my work it's not work. I love doing it. So like, I don't have a problem on Sundays. Like I'm actually on Sundays, I can't wait to get to work on Monday, and listen, some days are easier and some days are harder and that's okay. But overall, I've been lucky enough to be able to work in a field that I really love. And I didn't necessarily love fashion. I kind of I was third generation in the fashion business. And so kind of like I was good at it. But it wasn't really my passion. So I didn't really find my passion until I was 40 years old. Like I started a new career at 40 years old. So find your passion, and then look, save your money, right? Like, like stop buying stupid things. Like, stop buying like dumb little items on TikToks or this, that, and the other. Like, I like Nike shoes, right? And I every time I buy a pair of Nike shoes, I buy a share of stock, right? Shares like at 60 or whatever. I buy the equivalent amount in the stock, right? So that I'm like, okay, because if I was going to go out and buy, like, say, 2 pairs of Nikes or whatever the case is, I'm like, you know what? I'm like, so start saving your money early. Like, start planning now because by the way, it's a lot harder to save money once you have, a house and kids and, and different things that kind of happen.
Like pay yourself first, what they say, right?
Yeah. And so, start saving your money and look at build your credit the best way you can and buy your first home as soon as you can, right? Like I bought my first home thanks to my dad who advised me to buy a home, but, I was 19 or I was maybe 20. I bought my first home and then I went in there and, I was changing windows and, learning how to do plumbing or whatever the case is, because that kind of goes back. So I've done all those things, right? So when somebody says, hey, I got to go fix this and they try to give me some cockamamie story, I'm like, no, I've changed, faucets before. I've installed windows. So like, you can't tell me, right? So I'm not saying I'm an expert at it, far from it, but, just get your hands into everything until you can, find what you like doing best and then, and then find that passion and then just work towards that passion. It'll happen.
No, thanks so much. No, because I'm curious about development because I'm like third generation multifamily, and I obviously enjoy it. I'm in it all day. I deal with it, but it feels like there's something out there more for me. Like in a way, like something like a development. Maybe it just seems like sexy. It's cool. Like, oh, they're building from ground up. But for me, it's like I like taking units currently, buying a B-class property or C-class, and then like seeing decrepit bathrooms, bad flooring, ripping out the, doing new flooring, new baseboards, new tile bathrooms, and just kind of reinventing the place, painting it, getting new lights, LED lights, upgrading the vanities, upgrading the kitchen, putting granite countertop from Formica, and just like kind of transforming spaces. But I feel like the ultimate level is like you finding a piece of dirt and then really just building a community out of nothing, but like creating value out of thin air through all that hard work of getting everyone together. So I'm kind of curious, you think it's possible for me to go ahead and do that and where I should start?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's not only is it for you, but anybody else out there that has a drive to want to do it. There's no reason. My path is just a path, but there's a lot of different paths. And what works for me may not work for you. In a way, it's kind of like jiu-jitsu, right? I'm 6'3", 240-pound guy, and sometimes my instructor, I have several instructors, but I'll take advice from one instructor, and they're like, do it this way, okay? Well, but he's a much thinner frame, smaller guy, and my body doesn't really bend as well that way. But then I go with another guy, it's like a large guy, my size. He goes, yeah, no, that didn't work for me, so here's the way that I did it, right? So, at the end of the day, there's a goal, there's an objective to get to that finish line, but everybody's path is slightly different, and you have to figure out like what works best for you. But there's, you know, I think there's still plenty of opportunities out there, you know, for development. You know, the timing is also important. Like you can't rush. You gotta have patience, right? Like, you know, like anything else. Like, you know, it's, you know, been 10 years, right? So it's easy for somebody to come back and say, wow, you know, like, you know, look at everything you've done and whatever the case is. Yeah, but I, you know, like for the last 10 years, you know, I've been, you know, I've given everything I had towards it. And like, and if I'm doing it again, it's going to take that same amount of work and effort.
Yeah.
So, and then the other thing is like, look, you know, you're a smart guy, right? So like, go big.
You're saying don't start like a smaller project and build, like work on.
I mean, look, I'm the perfect example that like I hadn't built anything, right? And like I just worked and worked and worked, and you know I was able to hook up with the right people, and you know, like I said, whether it was, you know, no, not whether, it was God's will for me to meet this one and that person, and you know, for this partnership to kind of happen with my, you know, with my friends, and you know, and to find the right people along the way. But at the end of the day, it all started on the foundation that like, look, I'm going to be the hardest working person in the room. And so by doing that, you know, like people respect that, right? And you know, like, you know, you walk around my property with me and there's garbage on the floor, I'm picking it up. I'm not calling, you know, one of the maintenance crews or whatever the case is. You know, I walk around my property and myself and my partners, and we see something on the floor, you know, we pick it up. It's a cigarette butt, a can of soda, or whatever the case is. And so people respect that. And so I think that, you know, yeah, like that's my personality. But again, that's my path, right? Mm-hmm. But, you know, if, you know, and you kind of seem to have that adventurous personality. And, you know, you do a lot of, you know, interesting, cool stuff. And so I would say, yeah, like if you're going to do it, then just do it, you know, make it worth your time, because the amount of effort, like whether I was doing 50 units or 350 units, the work is just about the same. It's not that much more. I'll tell you what, it's certainly not 7 times the amount of work. It's like, it's maybe 10, 20% more work, but not.
I think Trump was talking about that when he did his first deal. He had a buddy. I don't know if this is true, but him and a buddy were going to do a deal. This is the first deal. He worked on like $1 billion deal, and his buddy worked on like a $2 million deal, and they both worked just as hard. And Trump, obviously, you know where he is now, but you know.
So, you know, go big.
Very cool. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, Sebastian.
Okay.
Thanks for making this time.
Thank you. All right. Pleasure.
All right. Thank you guys for listening to the YM Show. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel. It doesn't cost you guys anything, and it helps it tremendously grow. Hope you guys enjoy this episode. Leave a comment, and have a good one.